Welcome to the Inside Eco Devo podcast, where we highlight economic development happening in the state of Missouri. I'm your host, Eric Thurman, with the Missouri Department of Economic Development's communications team. On this episode, we're talking about Missouri's North region, and sitting down with us is the North Regional Manager, Shari Schenewerk. Shari, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. I'm so happy to be here and talk about my favorite topic, North Missouri.
Well, you are the expert, and I'm happy to dive into all that. So let's just get started. This is, we've done a number of these regional kind of spotlight episodes before, and we kind of always start off with just basic, tell me about your region. What is the North region?
The North region is the upper third of the state. We're the 34 northern counties. We are everywhere on the west, from St. Joseph up to the Iowa border. Then we go all the way across the state to the very eastern side, the Mississippi River, and then go all the way south to just north of St. Charles, so Lincoln and Warren counties. So the one thing the North has in common, regardless of where they're at, is we have a rural focus. And it's heavily agriculture, but at the same time, we have a lot of manufacturing. We have IT companies, healthcare, education, but there is just that rural feel to the region.
You said it's the upper third. Is the North region our biggest one? I know Central's pretty big, but is North, is it the biggest one?
Yes, despite what Mitch said in a previous episode, we are, by land mass, we are the largest region. But in addition to that, in terms of population, we are actually the smallest region.
Okay, very interesting dynamic going on there. Does that play into the work that you do in any way? Like we have big area, but not a lot of people. How does that factor in?
Yeah, so the North team, we do have these wonderful big projects. We work with businesses. We have a lot of Fortune 500 companies, but we do a lot of work with community revitalization. We work very closely with groups like Main Street, the small business development centers, enterprise facilitations in the Northwest. So we do a lot more with probably small businesses and trying to help communities be prepared to grow, particularly their population right now. That is an emphasis.
We're going to talk a lot about the North regions, a lot of particulars. Before we go too far down that road, this is a question that's kind of been lingering on my mind, but we have not really asked any of the regional managers. I know you've been in the game for a while. You got a lot of expertise and knowledge that you bring to the table. So hopefully this is a question that you can answer is, do you know the kind of rhyme and reason as to why the regions are broken up the way they are? Because like the North region is, north in Missouri, but parts of it go further south in the Central region. Kansas City and St. Louis, pretty small. Kind of give us the why and the how of why we've broken up the state the way we have.
Well, thank you, first of all. Great question. And I was fortunate to be a part of the original regional engagement 5 years ago when we formed. And there was a lot of research. Our idea is we are data-driven, so we don't just randomly assign counties. So there's a couple ways that our regions align. One of those is definitely through the Office of Workforce Development. They have regions, and they have workforce development boards. So you will find in the North, we exactly align with the Workforce Development Board of North Missouri. The other area, there's some alignment, will be with the regional planning commissions. They're the ones who do a lot of community development. And so we have a lot of mirroring regions so that we are working together and have those relationships. And so it isn't just haphazard. We really there was some thought that went into it. Now, that being said, going forward, will there ever be a time when we'll have to rethink this? We do have areas of the state that are getting caught in urban sprawl. We have other areas of state that might be, a better fit in a rural region, but that would be done, again, with a lot of research and thought toward what makes sense and when you align it with us and our partners.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the insight there. It's something I was like, why is North going further south than parts of Central, but it's called North? That doesn't make sense. But the fact that, it's all aligning in a way that, I guess to come back to a phrase that gets said a lot, economic development is a team sport. So if we're aligning properly with those that we're working with, then we're doing our job even better, or it makes it to where we can.
Absolutely, and that was the intent when the original regions were laid out. There have been some shifts, but you will find that alignment with the workforce boards and our RPCs is really still very important because we work together so closely.
Okay, so let's dive into some more particulars about the North region. Similar kind of stuff that we've talked about in previous regional engagement focused episodes, but you had mentioned the North, a lot of rural, a lot of manufacturing. What is like the main industry that is kind of driving the North?
That's a very easy question. Anything ag business, ag tech. We are very agricultural, and that includes everything from animal health. We have some leaders in research in the St. Joseph area, to a lot of food manufacturing, to chemical. We are very fortunate to have BASF that does ag chemicals, and they're both in St. Joe and just north of Hannibal in the small town of Palmyra. They're all drivers, but so much of it is related to the agriculture, food manufacturing sections.
And I'm guessing that kind of industry focus is playing into the kind of workforce that is there. Can you kind of go into those details?
Yes, so the North workforce is very interesting because even though it's ag-related, we talk a lot about skills credentials. So in terms of education, it's well educated. We do have universities. We have a lot of people with professional degrees. But at the same time, we have a lot of skilled trades, welders, drivers that support that ag tech industry. But we also have scientists. We have those that go with it. But it does lend to very interesting communities because they have that shared mission of supporting their companies, but the education levels are just all over the place because it's what's demanded by those industries.
When we're looking at those industries, big ag industries and ag focus that you were just mentioning there, do you find that kind of dictates the kind of, I wouldn't say business opportunities, but the kinds of businesses that are looking to grow and expand there? Does that kind of dictate the direction of the landscape of business in the North?
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime you look at industry corridors, so when you get on the west side of the state, they're part of that Kansas City healthcare, animal health corridor. So there's a lot of that goes on. On the east side, there's a lot more, I would say, food manufacturing, and it definitely gets into also cold storage is becoming a bigger and bigger industry for us.
Yeah, we just had that. I know it's a different region, but Americold just expanded in Kansas City. Does that kind of, because it's kind of adjacent, related to what your region is known for, when another region kind of expands and gets a big business deal like that, how does that impact your region, or does it?
So I'm just going to go back to, we talk about regions and regionalism. Having done this for a while, those regions are very artificial. So we are a region, our state, we're part of the Midwest. So really what's good for one is good for all. I will say we've had some smaller, maybe not so noticeable, but we've had a lot of cold storage additions. And they are incredibly important to our businesses to grow. But having one in the southern part of the state or in the Kansas City or the St. Louis region only is good news for the North.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I'd hope I'm not coming across of like, sorry, we're in the North, we don't care about what's going on, and that doesn't affect us. But what's good for Missouri is good for all of Missouri, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when we're looking at the North region, is there something just about the North region where you're like, yeah, we got a lot of ag stuff, we got this, but here's some hidden gems that people don't know. Is there something you would love people to know that they might not know about?
Well, I think the one, we talk about partnering. We partner with external agencies, but we also partner with other state agencies, even within DED. We share a lot of the same communities, things that are going on. And Highway 36, the highway of genius. So you go on one side, we're talking about the home of Mark Twain, where he came through. And then you go a little bit further, you just go north into Kirksville, and you have Andrew Taylor Still, the founder of osteopathic medicine. Therefore, we have a dental school, a medical school, those types of things going on. And then just south of there, you have Omar Bradley, General Bradley. And a little further, you have General Pershing. And then you have Walt Disney. And then a little further, you have J.C. Penney, the founder of the penny stores. And then you go into St. Joseph, and you have multiple, Walter Cronkite, Pony Express. So that highway, I think, encompasses the spirit of the North. We're people who find solutions. We are regional. We were regional before regional was cool. The Northwest Roundtable is the longest running economic development group in possibly the nation, definitely in the Midwest. They've been literally meeting monthly for decades. The Missouri Northeast Partnership, same thing. They meet, they find solutions, and that's something very unique in the North. And so when we have a company that comes in looking to expand or to locate there, they feel that. So if you're coming to, we use the example of Macon, you're going to have the support of Kirksville, Hannibal, Moberly, Brookfield, all the way over to Chillicothe. You're going to have that regional support because we know, going back to a previous conversation, what's good for one is good for all.
So kind of backtracking just a little bit and just kind of focusing on the regional manager's role, or maybe just the team members who are working a region. We asked this to the other folks as well, and I imagine the answer will be the same, but maybe your unique perspective brings a little something else. So what does a regional manager do? What is your guys' day-to-day like? What is the kind of marching orders, I guess, if you will? Because you guys are a little different than the typical DED team member. You work in the communities that you serve. You're remote a lot of the times. You're kind of boots on the ground. You're in it. You're in the trenches. So let us know, what's it like?
Being a regional manager is truly an honor, and it is exciting. I get up every morning excited about what the next day is going to bring. You have to be flexible because, particularly with 34 counties, you never know what the day holds. But I think what makes it so special is when you're spending time, you live in that region, you're working with those people day to day, you really develop a relationship, friendship, we're colleagues, and you get to know those communities. So I actually, in some cases, feel just as welcome in some of the communities I serve as the one I live in. And that is unique to our team. I'm very fortunate to have Scott Sharp in the North. He was a former economic developer for Trenton, Missouri, and he has that same thing. We are working with our neighbors, so that's so important. And so as project managers and regional manager, we're not managing programs. We're managing people. We are helping communities. We're helping grow. I like to call us the team of hope.
And working that close with people, I mean, you kind of get an insight of what a community needs. And so you can bring hey, here's the tool set that we have to help you in the way that, we see that you need. Do you have any kind of stories or kind of anything that kind of puts that in perspective, that kind of here's a moment where this is kind of proof of the pudding, pretty much?
Yeah, there are so many I could pick from, particularly as we went through the pandemic. That was such a scary time for our partners, for our communities, and we were able to help share information, not just for us, but for our Department of Health. From our just a government perspective, worked closely with our federal. During that time, it became apparent the food banks were being hit really hard. And we have one very large food bank on the west side of the state that services 20 counties. And the challenge we ran into were there were some stipulations on how much money could go to one community. And we were able to work very closely with Second Harvest Food Bank. We were able to help them. They now have a huge cold storage. They were literally having to turn down meat, cheeses, fresh foods, which is what people need. And they couldn't give it to the surrounding counties that they support. And we just had the groundbreaking along with our federal initiatives team and got to see the end result, which is a lot of people are going to have resources, fresh food that they would not have had we not had an early conversation about how the pandemic was hitting their organization.
I was there at Second Harvest covering the event. It's always good when you know that when you work in an organization that touches so many different lives in so many different ways. I think when people think economic development, they go, oh, business, big business like Amazon and Americold that we just talked about. But there's so many things that you get to touch that impact people so positively. And that's really amazing. And I think it shows the diversity of our small team, small but mighty. I think Christy Davis says that quite a lot. Can you kind of touch upon that, just the diverse nature in everything that you kind of have an impact on?
Yeah, so now is a really good time to talk about that. We have multiple highly competitive projects with very large companies. We're competing with other states. We are putting our best foot forward. And while we're doing that, we are getting a chance to go in with our local partners, some of our other regional partners, and put together a package. So that's your traditional economic development. But at the same time, one of the projects I'm most proud of, I met with a company that knew they wanted to expand, but it was just overwhelming. And they ended up not even using a single state program, but we were able to connect them with some federal and local programs. And we now have a new large cold storage unit in Canton, Missouri because of that.
I mean, that's the other thing, too. It's knowing that, hey, this business comes in, regardless of them using DED's plethora of programs and ways that we can help them coming in is the win, regardless of us having our names next to it or not, which is always great.
Yes, and that's what we do. We support. I like to think our team is the resource. If we're not able to answer a question, I bet we can find someone who can. And so we take that off. The business or the community has enough to worry about. They're having to deal with some issues and they need to get it solved. We come in and we can be sometimes research options for them. Sometimes we share with them best practices, things we've seen in other parts of the region or even in the state, and connect them to what resources they need or just to create a plan. How can we solve this? So from that aspect, it's not about just giving incentives and giving money. It's about being there with them and helping solve that problem.
And along with that, can you talk about, we're kind of hitting in and around it, but the process to bring those projects to fruition, whether it's, they use us or not, and I'm sure it's different for every single business. There's a little bit of uniqueness there, but can you kind of give us some insight?
Yes. So projects come to us, and a project is any time we have a business that wants to expand, locate, or even retain to keep jobs. And they can come from a lot of different ways. Sometimes it is a web inquiry. They send an email. Most often, it is either we are contacted directly or the local economic developer is contacted directly. Hey, I have an opportunity to grow. What's available? From that, we visit with the company. We listen. We don't just start throwing programs at them. We listen to them. And then once we hear what their concerns are, we like to walk them through the process. We don't send them an email with a bunch of links, fill out all these forms. That's not how we work. We work one-on-one with the company, along with the locals, if that makes sense, and bring the right partners to the table. Because sometimes a recent project I've had, it was more they were going to need infrastructure. So it was more bringing our regional planning to the table to talk about community development block grants that can assist with this before they even wanted to discuss, what kind of incentives could we get? Can you help us with the workforce? Every project's a little different.
I know a lot of that is kind of like, hey, we gotta be quiet. We can't talk about stuff. But is there one that you can, maybe one or two projects that you can kind of give us enough detail for to kind of showcase how different they can be, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the biggest one, the one that was most exciting for me, happened not too long after I started, and that was Kawasaki. They've been located in Maryville for a number of years. I know Anita Coulter. I've worked with her. I've worked with Josh McKim, the economic developer there, and they needed to expand. During the pandemic, the demand for their product was just exponential, and they need to expand and expand quickly. We entered a competitive project and against multiple states, many that were even more aggressive than we're even allowed to be in terms of incentives. But what we were able to do is through our relationships with them and the relationships they've had with Missouri One Start, their positive relationship they had with Josh at the local level, we were able to work with them. Ultimately, they ended up working with Gigi McQuinlan in Boonville, and we were able to open a second facility that has far exceeded anything that they expected. And by doing that, I just recently toured the Maryville plant again. That has taken pressure off them. They no longer have to require overtime. Their workforce is much happier. It's more stable. So that was such a big win for our state, but for both of those smaller communities. We were able to keep them happy, keep them in Missouri, but even add another facility here in Missouri. Yeah. So that was a big win. On the other hand, there's a small company. He's an entrepreneur in Lincoln County that does really high-tech, all kinds of metal fabrication. And he's going to, for the second time in 6 years, he's building another new building, and he's going to be doubling his workforce. And it's all about he has opportunity. And by working with the local community, we took this homegrown that continues to support his community, and he's going to hire his local people. He's building out the tech space for that community. It's going to be incredible. And again, small company. Process is very different, but the results are both phenomenal. It's a huge win for our region and for Missouri.
Yeah, you talking about those two sides of it kind of just made me wonder. I don't know if we've asked or if I've asked the previous regional managers this, but is there any kind of minimum requirement that a business has to meet before they use us in some kind of way? Do they have to have a certain amount of workers? They have to be a certain size? Is there any kind of requirements there?
Yeah, I won't go into the really deep dive on that because there are many ways we have classified businesses. So in the rural, it makes it a little bit easier because we have Missouri Works. That is our tax incentive for job creation. That's probably our most popular program. To qualify in rural areas, you only have to create 2 jobs and have a $100,000 investment. So we are able to help really small companies. Sometimes they choose to participate, sometimes they don't, but it really is an opportunity for small companies. In the larger communities, there is what's called statewide works. And in that point, you get into it has to be 10 jobs, and there's no required investment, just that they're growing. Then we get into the things like mega works. Those are those big projects where it has to be like 100 jobs, 120, but everything is based on the county average wage. So they have to be with zone works. If they're in an enhanced enterprise zone, they have to have 80% of county average wage and maintain that. With rural and statewide, it's 90%. But then when you get in the larger ones, it may be 120% average wage. And something people may not be aware of, they have to earn these incentives. So they are performance-based. So we don't just hand them a check. They have to create the jobs, and they have to have health benefits. They have to be, it came from years ago, the Quality Jobs Act. These have to be quality jobs for the state to incentivize them.
All right, perfect. Versus kind of what we do now, how has the game of economic development changed over the years? How are we evolving as, industries and whatnot evolve around us?
Yes. So years ago, and again, I primarily stayed on the workforce side and now do project management as well. It was all about, do you have cheap land? Do you have a building? Can I get the utilities there? Basically, what are you going to give me? And that's how it worked. And then they come in, create 600 jobs. That's not how it works anymore. We come in, and sometimes one of the first conversations we have is, can you provide the workforce? So that being said, we're working with things like childcare finding childcare so people could get back to work. We're looking at workforce housing, that middle income housing. Do we have it available? And then certainly it's a more comprehensive. We have issues like water. Can you supply water? Do you have enough electric to support us? Because as these companies come in, they're more automated. Well, in many cases, that automation is a heavy power load. And to do that, we have to make sure we have all those pieces. So there's a lot more that goes into a project now than there were years ago when it was just build it and they will come. And many times these projects, they may be investing $80, $100 million and only creating 50 jobs or fewer. And so the skill level, it's not standing in front of a manufacturing line. It is programming. And they have to be able to run computers. They have to be able to problem solve. So training has become such an important part of economic development as well.
On the flip side of that, the future, are you able to kind of look at that projection or that kind of the way that economic development has evolved and kind of have, no one has a crystal ball, but to be able to see like, hey, we seem to be going in this direction here. We should probably hit A, B, and C so we maintain.
Yes, I'm going to say those conversations I talked about earlier, child care is going to be critical. We have to get our younger workers back to work, and child care is very expensive. We have in the north on a negative side is we have child care deserts. We are addressing them and doing a really good job thanks to our partners at the Office of Childhood and some of our school systems. They're addressing it, but it's something we're going to have to keep working on. We are going to have to address how we look at housing because people have different views of what they want in homes, and that seems to be changing, but we have to have it available because people don't want to come if they don't have a good place to live. I think quality of place in our communities is going to continue to be very important. People will choose to move somewhere because that's where they want to live, and then they'll find a job. That's a little different than we've seen in the past. So we anticipate more of that. So our communities really have to continue to work to be high-quality places to live. Broadband will, until we have every home, every school, every business wired, that has to continue to be an emphasis. And I think all of our transportation, that is something we hear a lot of. They have to have available. Our ports, our airports, our highways, all critically important to the future of our growth.
Mentioning broadband, we've had BJ on quite a number of times. Broadband expansion in Missouri is a huge thing all over, especially in our department. And I'm assuming more rural areas have a greater need there. Do you work within that realm of some way, like the kind of collaboration with our Office of Broadband Development or other developers there? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we talk about regionalism. The North 34 counties meet once a year, and several years ago, they met and tackled broadband. And actually, we were very instrumental. They came down and visited with the governor and said, we need that. That was part of the precursor to the Office of Broadband. So yes, I was in those conversations. It's critically important for all of our region to grow. And we do go out and meet with them. I actually did a joint announcement with them in Hamilton, Missouri, home of J.C. Penney, because we had the early conversations and we're able to connect them to broadband, who was then able to help them with the grants. So yeah, there's a lot of intersection with what regional engagement does and what our other programs do.
A big thing that you need to work remote is internet connections and more remote work and being able to, work for a company anywhere from your home or, from, a communal office space of some kind is growing, and it will continue to grow, I'm sure. How do you foresee that kind of impacting what a region's main industries are or the kind of workforce that is there, or if there is some kind of impact there?
Well, I will definitely say the impact is our younger people coming up, our talent pipeline, have to have those internet skills, computer skills, and understand technology. Because even our companies that are in place and people report, many of them still allow hybrid work schedules, virtual work schedules. That's so wonderful because if somebody needs to be off for a school event or something, they can still get their work done. So we've seen a lot of flexibility with companies when it comes to that because we now have broadband available and people can work from home. In some cases, they just allow them to. In other cases, it's not possible to do it all the time, but even part of the time, that makes living in rural Missouri much more attractive.
It has to have some kind of positive impact on the population level too. You don't have to move away from the small town to have, the big fancy high paying job or whatnot. So are you guys kind of seeing that already? Is there kind of statistical stuff that you guys have on that?
Yes, we're very fortunate to have Jeff Pinkerton. I work with him all the time. He's our data person and it's so wonderful. We have seen a reversal. We have seen areas that had long-term population decrease. We're seeing in some cases they're leveling off. In other cases, we've seen population growth. And that's a positive. And I think a lot of that has to do with people's ability to work from home. And in some cases, even for education, our young people can stay at home, go to college and work. And some of them choose to do that. So, yeah, we've seen a definite positive impact of our broadband.
Yeah, that's great. Getting back to project announcements and stuff, and I know if something's in the work, you can't really talk about it, but is there any kind of exciting stuff going on in the region right now that you can talk about?
We have a lot that will be announced in the near future. And these are generational projects. These are going to impact those communities for years to come. I wish I could say more. They are still in the confidential phase, but it is always such an honor to work on those because what we know is those anchor jobs lead to other growth and other development. We've seen it in a number of rural communities where a new company comes in or a company expands and they spend a lot of money, well, that leads to the city being able to do a better job on the sidewalks and streets and add to their parks, build a new swimming pool, whatever it is. And it's breaking the negative cycle and building that positive cycle. And that's what these announcements do. We've had some good announcements, but I think the big ones will be soon.
Okay. I know we've talked about a few of them, Second Harvest and their new cold facility and dock expansion, the local business that you were talking about a little bit earlier. Are there some others that you go, hey, these are good ones to highlight that may not have shined as bright or got as much attention, or maybe something that you go, hey, this is leading into other good stuff that, something that's already done that we can talk about?
Yeah. So one that was very interesting and always love when we can have those sustainable jobs is Triumph Foods in St. Joseph was able to transition and bring back their own maintenance. They had been subcontracting it for years. Now they were able to add 88 maintenance level jobs. These are good paying jobs, but more importantly, they now have the same benefits, retirement, and everything that their other employees. And that has been a really huge impact for them as well as for St. Joseph because those are jobs that will be there and they're career jobs versus somebody just taking it through an agency and maybe will be there for a year or two and then move on.
What does it take to ensure that economic development excels in Missouri, in a region? I know the region kind of thing is kind of fake lines on a map, but to ensure that economic development is going to excel, what are kind of the bullet points that like, hey, we need X, Y, Z here?
Well, I'm going to echo what some of the others have said. Strong leadership with a vision. You have to have a strategy and you have to know where you want to be. And I will say we are so fortunate. Director Hadaway, I've worked with her for a while now. She has such a vision. She was here during the transition, I think had a lot to say about how we needed to change to be successful. And then in addition, we now have Lori Becklenberg, worked over the St. Louis Economic Development Group. Her perspective, she brings that project management, that international experience with her. And then we have Shauna Searcy, who through local economic developers and her previous experience, they just have such great leadership. And they're willing to listen, and we keep just getting better. The other thing that we have to have is to continue to build out our partnerships. within the state, other state agencies, and across the state, we just have to have those partnerships so that we can bring resources to the table when needed. We have to be quick. We have to be responsive. But I think even more important, we have to be proactive. We're out talking to our businesses and our communities all the time. We don't wait until a company's closing to go talk to that community. We are out there trying to keep that from happening. Or if it is, how can we fill that void sooner than later? So those are things I think are critically important. And then I'm going to go at a more personal level. I think excellent customer service and having a good delivery system is critical, because when you're working with people, they need to know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And if we're working with them and we promise something, we've got to deliver.
And then bringing that to a more local kind of regional look, does the North, the kind of communities that are there, the mindset that might be there, is there anything unique about the way, business has to be handled there?
The North is very rural, and you have to meet them where they're at. I don't go in with any assumptions. When we meet with a company or with a community, don't go in thinking you have the answer. Sit and listen, and it might take a little bit longer. They're maybe a little more intentional. And that's something I find refreshing, because if you have the right conversations, you will eventually get to what the real need is. And what a company says to you or what we think is the problem may not actually be the barrier or the problem they have to address. And then once we are able to really have that conversation and work with them, we're able to find a solution that works for everybody.
When we're looking at businesses coming to Missouri or businesses that are already here and looking to expand, why should they? Why is Missouri a location that businesses should consider?
Well, first of all, location. We are right at the crossroads, Missouri-Mississippi River. We have interstate, we have railroad, we have 2 international airports. So there's all of that being said, which benefits the entire state. Second of all, I cannot applaud our Missouri One Start enough with their training options. They're one of the top programs in the nation. And then on the workforce side, we're consistently in the top 3 for apprenticeships. That's a model that works really well. We were ahead of the game. We do that well. The other thing we do is we keep the cost of doing business low, because all the incentives you can throw them at them, but they go away. A low tax rate and cost of living is good for the people and it's good for the business. It keeps the business profitable, and the people can have that quality of life. They can have a home, a car, land if they want it. They have that opportunity in Missouri. And we are an incredibly diverse state. There's so many opportunities. So in North Missouri, we have all the good without all the traffic.
All the good without the traffic. Yeah.
So truly, our communities talk about we're 5 or 10 minutes from anywhere in the community, and that is a real plus.
I wish we had that here in Jefferson City. There's, Jefferson City is not a huge city. It's like a big, small town, but there's so many cars. It's like, where's everyone coming from? So I wish we had that here. That would be very nice. So we're kind of wrapping up here. Shari, is there anything about the North region that we didn't talk about that you think listeners would want to hear?
I think there's a lot of natural beauty. There are a lot of golf courses. There's huge quality of life. And I'd be remiss without talking about some of our public schools, our vocational schools. We have some top-rated school systems up there, and that is something so important. If a company is going to bring their people there, executives there, you need a good education system, and I think that is something that the North just excels at.
All right. Well, I kind of feel like I could sit and pick your brain all day on regional engagement, but I won't hold you up. I know you got other stuff to do, but thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us, and hopefully our listeners got something out of it, and hopefully if a business is looking to expand or move into Missouri, they'll consider your region and work close with you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Inside Eco Devo. We have great episodes coming your way every 2 weeks, so be sure to subscribe. Also, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Tell us what economic development topics you want to hear more about. This helps us fulfill our motto of helping Missourians prosper by bringing content to our listeners that they want to hear. Leave a comment on an episode or send an email to ded.communications@ded.mo.gov and stay tuned for more Inside Eco Devo.